This is People I Know Show, a podcast about interesting people, personal growth, and being wrong. I'm Curt Carstensen. Today on episode 36, I talk with a former coworker of mine who has since retired. Her name is Terry Henry. Terry and I discuss some of the things that she's influenced me about, helped change my mind about, involving American Indian people or Native people, her upbringing, and some of the challenges she's experienced and witnessed over the years. Besides the extended conversation on those topics, we also get into the idea of perpetual victimhood and intergenerational trauma, some terms that I don't often consider. And before the end of the conversation, we'll get into the being wrong segment about judging or discriminating against individuals who've made mistakes, but maybe long in the past. As with most episodes of People I Know Show, Terry is someone that has impacted the way I think about something, and I'm happy to share her perspective with you. Now to my conversation with Terry Henry. Joining me today on People I Know Show is Terry Henry. Hello, Terry. We've been spending some time together.
Hi, Curt. It's been a great visit.
And I came up to visit you here, and I guess you can describe better where we're at exactly. I could probably look at a map and say, but tell me how you would describe this part of Canada to someone that's never been here.
It's flatland. It's southern Manitoba. It is, we're on the Roseau River, Anishinabe First Nation, 2A. I'm as far from the main reserve as you can get. That's probably about 20 or 30 miles away. And that's where we're at. Out in the sticks, fighting with the wood ticks.
We used to work together, and we'd have some downtime occasionally or fairly often, and we'd chat a little bit about all kinds of different things. And at one point, you invited me, or told me, come up here sometime. So that always sticks in my mind when someone invites me. So I try to make it happen eventually, and I don't know how long it's been since you invited me, but I finally made it here, and seeing where you live and what it's like around here. And it's been a learning experience, as all my travels have been, just to go see a slightly different part of the world. So I've appreciated being here. Among the things that I find most fascinating and interesting about having gotten to know you previously, and I guess I've gotten to know you better just spending some time with you here, is I grew up with this typical American educational system where the first thing I knew about Indians or Native Americans, or however someone might label, and how do you label yourself, your heritage?
I use the word Indian. That causes problems in my own community because they want to be known as natives. But the word Indian is from the Portuguese, and it means, it's en Dios, is how the conqueror, the jerkhead, whatever you want to call him, Christopher Columbus called us in communications to the king and queen. And if you break the word down, en Dios means like God or with God. So I really like that. A lot of people say that India is where Christopher Columbus was headed in 1492, but there was no India in 1492. That was Hindustan. And those people were not Indians, they were Hindus. So I like Indian, of God, like God.
So that's, to me, that's just a small example of you've studied and you've understood the history of so much more than I think the average person does. I went through the American educational system, and the first impression to me was that the white people and the Native people or the Indian people, they were happy getting along together, and all that BS that we learn as little kids, and we do little finger turkeys or whatever, all that stupid stuff that we learn. We don't get a real sense of the history. So I would like from you to get a sense of your experience and your history, and then we can get into more of the history like that you've learned to help me better understand this, and for the person listening, the many people listening, help them probably learn more than they ever have known. So I've come to you for that, because you've influenced me realizing I don't know a damn thing really about this. And obviously you know much more than me. So give me an understanding of your upbringing. And I know you and I have talked off the microphone about this, but for me and for the audience, an understanding of your upbringing and the things that you get a sense talking to the average person, what they don't know. They don't understand.
I was raised in a middle-class community in Minneapolis, Minnesota. My father, who was a boarding school survivor, just look up residential school survivors. You'll know what I'm talking about, beatings and rapings by priests and things like that. He ended up in Minneapolis looking for a better life. He had been told that all his life, he had been made to be ashamed of being an Indian person. He was told by the priests and things to identify as a French Canadian. Well, lo and behold, my French Canadian Indian father married a white woman, and she didn't know he was French Canadian or Indian.
Mm-hmm.
She thought he was French Canadian. So I was born in Minneapolis, and I was very, very fortunate. My parents were able to feed us and clothe us and put us in a parochial school, which I wouldn't do to any kid. But it was hidden. It wasn't. My dad was raised to be ashamed, and when I found out, I knew I was Indian, but when I found out why he was ashamed, that piqued my interest. That made me want to understand. That made me, and I've always been proud of being Indian. But I can see, and I've been fortunate that because I can pass white or Indian, that I haven't experienced the racism and things like that. On occasion I do, but not very often. I don't know what to say other than I had a pretty good upbringing, as long as, if you think about the 50s and 60s, it wasn't Ward and June Cleaver, I can tell you that. There was a lot of animosity, a lot of drinking between the parents and things like that. A lot of pain that my dad had that was unresolved, that probably made him not able to be emotionally there for any of us. And a mother that wanted that emotional support and didn't get that, and the frustration involved with 3 demanding kids. So it wasn't, Ozzie and Harriet by any means. I think they did the very best they could with the limited ability they had. My dad hadn't been taught to parent, and my mother needed some help in that area. So
hopefully for somebody, this inspires some interest to learn more about it. But if you're willing to elaborate a little bit on your understanding of whether it's your dad or other people of his generation, what happened to them. This was the thing that I think when you told me this 2 years ago or whenever it was, that made me shocked, because I just had no idea that of all the atrocities that may have happened or did happen between the European settlers and their descendants and the people that were living on this land beforehand, the fact that so much of it was still as recent as it was just kind of shocked me.
Well, yeah, when you look at 1978, Jimmy Carter was passing the Religious Freedom Act so that Indians could finally celebrate their own spirituality without fear of repercussion. The Indian Art Act, so they could sell their artwork without being pirated by fakes, and the Indian Child Welfare Act, where our children were being taken from us in record numbers and put into loving white homes. And I guess I got to stop with the European settlers, and we refer to people as colonizers.
Okay. Yes.
They settled on land that was already settled, and with them, the whole manifest destiny thing, we're not a conquered people. We're still here. We tried to work within the systems. We entered into treaty after treaty after treaty. None of them have been honored. So in 1924, guys they've come back from World War I, and they fought for the United States and all that sort of stuff. And they weren't even granted citizenship in their own country until 1924. Oh, there's so much you could research and look at. Right now, Canada, where we are, they're settling with the day school survivors and the 60s scoop survivors. The 60s scoop, it's a big thing. If we weren't raising our children according to white ways of raising children, they were taken from us. Prior to that, it was the boarding schools. The boarding schools, it was illegal for an Indian to leave the reservation. You had to get a pass from the Indian agent. It was illegal for somebody to visit without a pass. So, and then we were dependent on rations. Our land base was gone. Our hunting gathering base was gone, diminished, severely diminished. So we could no longer support our children. By signing into these treaties, we ceded a lot of territory. A lot of unceded territory was taken, also, another story. But we couldn't feed our children anymore. I mean, we couldn't hunt, gather, fish, and provide for our children. And so our rations were denied to us. Our rations were denied if we didn't put our kids into a boarding school to be educated, because it was save the man, get rid of the Indian beliefs. It was pretty rugged for a lot of people. So this went on from the late 1800s until I believe they closed the last school in 1990s. So boarding school, you take a 5-year-old kid away from his family, you cut their hair, you beat them if they speak their native language, you put them in a dorm with much older boys, you don't let them see their parents for 10 months out of the year. How do they learn how to parent? How do they learn how to trust? How do they learn how to do anything? So they come home those 2 months out of the year and they're strangers to their parents now, and they can't talk to them anymore. So these things have that balloon effect, that ripple effect that, it just generations had to be raised like this. So the bonding was disrupted. We didn't have a choice. We're learning now that we have choices. We're fighting for the things that we should have. Basic things. Housing is atrocious up here. I'm very fortunate. I have a house on the reserve. There's people that live 20-30 to a house because there's a housing shortage and there's mold problems. And I mean, I could go on and on and on. Substandard living situations. Water's being poisoned. Oh my God. Once you open this can of worms, everything is dependent on everything else. We've got fly-in communities up north of here that, if you want to buy a watermelon, which we were fortunate enough to have for breakfast, you're talking $20 because it has to be flown in. I don't know. I'm so distracted when I try to delineate one thing that's wrong. All I can tell you is that since white contact, our family structure has been destroyed, and now people are realizing it, and they're fighting to reinstitute it, and they're fighting for their idea of a family structure, not the accepted European mom, dad, nuclear family. They're fighting for the structure of their family unity, the grandmas, the grandpas, to reintegrate into this society that is enveloping. And we're getting there. It took a long time to get this sick. It's going to take a long time to get well, but I see so much growth in the community.
And I think what you've been talking about, it makes me consider that if at any point in my upbringing or the average white American person's upbringing where they would have seen an Indian or a Native person and made some sort of judgment or assessment based on whatever, as we tend to do as people, we'll see someone that comes from a different background and possibly judge them on something. I'm trying to get better and better at not doing that and trying to understand. But if anything would have been perceived as negative, you're giving all these reasons why it would have been incredibly difficult for someone growing up in that area, in that era, to live a quote unquote normal or better than normal life, because there's nothing normal about an upbringing being taken away from your parents, and then at some point having your own family and then trying to like have everything work well and be normal. I don't like the word normal, but it's hard to do anything close to normal if your upbringing is completely abnormal.
And I wouldn't say, I say it was dysfunctional, and it was made dysfunctional by outside influence, not by our own influence. And to walk into a culture and demand that your subculture now becomes part of the mainstream culture is just wrong. It's just wrong. Nuclear family is great, but what's wrong with the community working together, raising the kids? What's wrong with that? I just don't get it. It's not a mom, dad, 2 kids, a dog, and a picket fence up here. It's grandmothers raising their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, because they raised their own kids, but their kids didn't have that, not due to the grandmothers, and maybe in some cases it was, battling the inability to adequately parent because they hadn't been parented themselves. So generation after generation after generation. But now we have grandparents raising their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and it's pulling together. I can't reiterate how strong I see this. I see a single dad raising his kid. We all want to clap him on the back. Well, their single mom's been doing that forever, and I do think the women do a tremendous job up here. I've never seen such strong, dedicated people. They make do with nothing. You show up at the door, they feed you with nothing. We go to bury our people and there's a feast, and people don't have the groceries, but they'll bring you whatever they have. It might be a head of lettuce. It might be a loaf of bread. They're so open and sharing and caring. I love it up here. I wish I would have come up here 20 years ago.
With what you are observing up here, and I guess just off of what you've just described, what are the improvements that you're seeing? Like you're seeing positive signs of things getting better and better. What have you seen, and what do you hope to see to continue this progress?
Oh, I hope for self-dependence. That's not happening up here yet. I hope for job capabilities for my people up here. I hope for people to have what they need. I wish that they would be able to all have a car to get somewhere. I wish they all had a phone so they could call for interviews. I wish we need a lot of training. We need a lot of skill-based training. I think, we can identify the problems over and over and over. And now we have to address the problems. Now we have to make training available. We have to make sure that kids can go to a trusted daycare so parents can look into getting a job or creating a job, or maybe some financing help to start their own small business where they can be self-sufficient. There just has to be better for my people up here. I don't know what else to say. I don't feel hopeless. 10 years ago, I would have felt hopeless about the situation up here. because I didn't see because I wasn't living here and I didn't see all the strength that my people up here have. They have unbelievable, unshakable ingenuity. They can make do with nothing. I'm proud of that. I see, we always laugh, shade tree mechanics. Well, this is the one car you have, and, the part is unattainable financially, so you'll go scab one from the junkyard. I mean, they make do with nothing. I'm just very proud of them. Very proud of them. And I see the relationships developing between their kids. It's, oh man, it's really, really nice to watch. Their kids go to school here now. They get to be with their parent or parents, and grandparents, and aunties, and cousins. And they're included. And we're offering a little bit more all the time for our kids. We have the jiu-jitsu, we have, some classes, we have the Makun Center, we have oftentimes lunch service, oftentimes the kids are now getting involved in a lot of the cultural developments that really didn't pop back into our lives until the 60s. So, I don't know. I prattle. There's just so much.
You, as you stated, grew up in Minneapolis, but you were exposed to this area, I think, at different points in your childhood from what you've told me, and then you retired a little over a year ago, and I guess I don't know how long the plan was, but once you retired, I believe your plan for some time was to come live here. If you can go a little deeper into your history, especially that some of the younger years, your first experiences actually being on the reservation as opposed to living in the big city. What is it that draws you here from those early years?
My grandfather, also a boarding school survivor, Tom Henry, he is the most influential person I have ever had in my life. He was chief up here for, I believe it was 19 years, and there was nothing to be had. We were getting flooded out. There was no food. There was shortage of rations. He just finally tired of it. When you have a very limited amount of resources and people scrapping over them. And he got tired of the fighting, is what I've been told and what he's told me. And he just took his horse and wagon, and this is in the mid-50s, and he went about 60 kilometers east. And believe it or not, he purchased 160 acres of land. Well, he couldn't purchase it. It was illegal to sell Indian land in 1955. So a really good guy, white guy, John Kachuk, bought this land. My grandfather, who was in his later 50s, early 60s, built a log shack with mud and hay walls. No running water, no electricity, no nothing. When my father started bringing me up here to visit, it was like coming home. My grandfather and grandmother had a slew of grandkids that visited. And he wasn't demonstrative. He wasn't the kind of guy that's going to hug and kiss you and tell you, oh, good job. He was very, very quiet. He was very unassuming. But when you walked in, you saw the love that he had for you in his eyes. It was phenomenal. And it was like coming home. So I've always wanted to be here. What's that?
You would come here as often as you could, basically,
oh
since then?
Oh, my God, yes. I remember being, into my teens and hitchhiking up here and not wanting to be a burden on my grandfather, so I'd go shoplifting at all the stores on my way up. I'd have canned hams and cans of tuna fish and bags of rice down the front of my pants, and I'd come, hitchhike across the border, come down his driveway, probably had to walk from Piney or got a ride to his house or whatever happened, but I'd come clinking down like the old Tin Man with all those cans rattling in my sleeves. So, and I just loved it here. It's always been home. And I have an older sister who does not embrace, she lives in Virginia. She doesn't embrace this. She's got a curiosity about it, and she's proud of it, but this isn't the lifestyle she would pick. She's a wonderful person, but she wouldn't pick this lifestyle. My brother did retire up here, my younger brother, but he passed away, and the house that I'm in he had secured, and then my father moved up here back to the reserve, and after he passed, I kind of struggled tooth and nail to hang on to it because I had invested heavily in the rehab, and I knew this was my retirement home, and it is like coming home. I walk in the front door and I'm glad to be here. I live alone with the coyotes and the deer and the I saw a huge cat print out in my driveway, and my little spoiled rotten Jack Russell Terrier, and I've got plans to do more improvements, and I just know that I've got a long time to get anything done, so I'm not in a hurry. But I am home.
That gives me this thought that, as we were talking earlier, I sense one of the struggles potentially in this area and in a lot of other parts of, say, the United States, a lot of different types of communities, a struggle to really get ahead in life, if that's a goal, is there's not like generational wealth passed on in some communities. And you were telling me previously that whenever it is that you're passing on, what the wealth that you've acquired and put into this home, you don't have any control of where that goes necessarily.
No, there's no private ownership on the reserve. I live in a band owned house.
Band, B-A-N-D.
B-A-N-D. Pembina Band of Ojibwe. I live in a band-owned house. The reserve owns this house. I have the luxury of living here. That's about it. If I were to pass on, it would go, respectfully, it would go to my children, but none of my children really have a desire to live here. They were raised in the city. They love the city. They're going to stay in the city. So this home will be up for grabs. And I hope somebody will come in that appreciates the solitude, the quiet, the peace, the serenity. And I'm sure they will. Any improvements I do, I'm pretty proud of the fact that I'm building a pole barn right now. Any improvements I do will be left to whoever gets to use this house next.
I think that's a difference where you're proud of it. You've accumulated what you've accumulated in life, and you're putting it into this for your existence. And then because your kids don't want it, which they don't have to, you can't pass this on to them. And that, to me, that's a very different thing than what I find as like my upbringing would have told me happens. So it's a different thing happening because of the reservation and the lifestyle or the culture.
Yeah, it is a lot different. If anything changed, if my son or one of my sons or my daughter would want to be here, they would kind of have first opportunity. It's just generally done on a word of mouth thing. Back from the days when we had our own areas of trap line, we knew that the north end on the main reserve was my grandfather's. We knew a little bit south of him was, I believe it was the Pierres. And we just knew, who belonged where. And this, because Henrys have now been in it for, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years, somewhere in there, that it would kind of first go to a Henry. So, and my kids, it's just a real respectful way of doing it. If my kid moved in here, they'd let him stay here. So,
you mentioned hitchhiking up here when you were younger, and even some of the shoplifting that you did to both survive and not be a burden on your grandfather. If you're willing, are there more stories from your life, some of the experiences, whether or not it's related to anything to do with the reservation or just some of the things that would help someone get to know you? I know you've shared some of those with me, and there's probably a billion other things about maybe the rebel that you once were. I don't know, maybe you're still a rebel now, but it sounds like when you were younger, there was a lot of rebel to you.
Yeah, I was kind of a rebel. I pity anybody that tried to raise me. I really do. I can imagine the frustration that I caused. I can imagine a parent with limited parenting skills having to raise somebody that put them through hell like I did, I didn't do really horrible bad things. I did things that are referred to as status crimes. If I were an adult, it would have been legal. I was a minor. It was illegal. Truancy, smoking, being in a bar, bar brawling. So I spent a little bit of time in the juvenile detention system, which was good because I had my own public defender, first name basis. And I have been a tomboy all my life. I know I don't know what the correct phrase would be today, but I relished being a tomboy. And, I liked being the pitcher in baseball. I liked being the, cleanup hitter. I liked being the quarterback in all the park board rec teams that I played on. And my mother named me Teresa. What a feminine name for a tomboy. So I had my own personal public defender in juvenile center, and I did legally change my name, probably when I was 13, 14, somewhere in there, to Terry. I'm much more suited as a Terry. And the judge granted it, so I was kind of happy about that. Oh, and I was named Teresa because I was put in a Catholic school, and you had to have a saint's name. And I was talking with you about confirmation. When you're confirmed, you have to take a saint's name. And I caused a ruckus again because I wanted Teresa Lynn David. David was the only strong saint I saw. That was taboo. That was in the 60s. That was taboo. Girls didn't do that. So I had to settle for Elizabeth. So now it's Terry Lynn. Plain.
Girls didn't do that, but it sounds like throughout your life you've kind of ignored that whenever possible.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I had a single mom, 3 kids, and back then I think the minimum wage was $2.30 an hour. I could make that kind of money in a female environment, female job environment. Again, back even in the early 80s. Well, I chose a different route. I chose to get into the trades. Well, this was actually before my kids. But I think at the time, everybody was making $2.30 an hour, and I was making $11 an hour, which afforded me a brand new car. It afforded me a brand new motorcycle. It afforded me rent at that time was $130 a month for a 2-bedroom duplex. So I was very happy with that kind of money as an electrician. I lost that trade after I crashed my Harley. I was out of work for about 8 years. And during that time, I had my children, got divorced. Ladies out there, do not marry an outlaw motorcyclist. I did because I was young, insecure, looking for love. Thought he'd change. Come on, we've all thought that. So I got pregnant, quit the partying, quit all that sort of stuff, and he continued to party. I think he partied until he had a stroke a few years back. But anyway, so I lost that trade and was on workman's comp for a number of years, and then I got into the school system and I went into Indian education. And while I was going to school, they had a program, Teachers of Color, and I started college under that. And I went to school, raised my kids, worked 3 jobs. I delivered newspapers, so I didn't have to have daycare. Then I went to school. My second son would flip a coin. He was in kindergarten. I'm supposed to be advocating for his supposed to be advocating for Native American attendance improvement. And I think he had the worst attendance record ever because he spent all his kindergarten hours in my college classes with me, which was fine. The professors actually included him. It was kind of fun. And then in the afternoon, I'd work for Indian Education, get home, feed my kids, and then I'd go work at a packaging plant. So it was exciting. I walk on my knuckles by the end of the week.
And two of the things that you haven't brought up specifically yet that you did that I think have probably given you some pretty good understanding of people and different backgrounds is you did foster care. You had children living in your home for several years, and then you taught in the city, teacher in the city for, I think you've told me, 17 years. So from those two experiences, the different kids from the different backgrounds that you've had in your life for a year or more at a time, what can you glean from that it really would stand out in your experience?
Oh, my goodness. We need parental involvement. I mean, you hear that over and over and over and over. And I think that we have to let our kids make mistakes, but not cover for them. I can't tell you the number of parents that find fault with everybody else but their own child. I tried very hard with my own kids. A teacher is not out to get your kid. The paraprofessional is not out to get your kid. You have to tell your kids it's okay to make a mistake. My job as a parent is to help you correct that mistake. But you've got to let them own that error before they can. You can't blame the teacher for your child's misbehavior. You can't blame anybody else. Self-accountability, we have to teach that. How's that?
I think that's kind of what goes into one of the many reasons I have this podcast and want to talk to people, because I feel like for a part of my life, I didn't hold myself accountable for the things I wasn't understanding or I was doing wrong or however you want to describe it. And then at a certain point, I started to realize there's things that are striking me that there's a better way to look at things, a better way to do things. And it's because of the different people and the different situations and the different travel experiences, different things that I've done where it's like, I didn't know this before. And now something's happened where I can know something new. And I'm excited to know this new thing as opposed to thinking and having the behavior that I'm doing everything perfectly, or say the parent that defends their child who's misbehaving. And I'm sure that happens a lot. Instead of having it be a lesson to the child that you can behave differently, perhaps better, to defend the child against the teacher or something like that, as those situations happen a lot. It just, people aren't accountable to enough to the fact that no one's anywhere near perfect, but we have these opportunities to recognize something in ourselves that can improve. And I want to keep improving. And if through a conversation like this, I can share stories from someone else with a different perspective, someone that's impacted me, I want to just keep doing that. It's the sharing of information and ideas that can allow life to get better for more and more people, and maybe someday everybody.
Yeah, it's wonderful that you love your kid enough, but not to the point of crippling them. Don't raise a victim. Don't start teaching self-accountability. That's all I can say on that. With all the kids that I met, the kids that struggled, the kids that were able to overcome that is because the parents took the responsibility to actually redirect, parent, let the kid know it's unacceptable what they're doing, redirect. You don't have to punish. I'm not saying that. I'm saying let your kid admit that he did wrong. I grew up blaming everybody else, and I think that you get to a certain age and you look back and, I can continue blaming, I'm this way. I was unhappy because this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. Or you can get to an age where you look back and say, yeah, that was shitty, but it brought me to here. And now what am I going to do? Am I going to continue blaming and pointing a finger, or am I going to just go on and let go of that? But self-accountability, mine came late. And to ease that path for a kid, make them accountable. That's really all I can say. And love them even if they make mistakes. Redirect. Help them. Let them know it's okay to make a mistake. Let them know that you're there to help them improve. But don't cover for them.
You said your self-accountability came late, and I feel like mine did too. And it's probably common, but I'm afraid some people, some cases, it never comes. And if it doesn't come, that would be the type of thing that would, I think, transfer generationally. And then the children and the children of those children, if it just never comes for a family or some people somewhere, that there's a struggle that's going to be there their entire life. Because if you don't recognize things that you can do differently or improve on, or recognize that sometimes you'll be the one making the mistakes and at fault, how do you ever improve your life situation?
I don't know. We have to stop this perpetual victimhood. We have to. Our society almost celebrates victimhood, If you read Facebook, you read the newspaper, you read anything, and it's all negative. Nobody, and that's really just putting a little paintbrush on it, making it a general statement. But yeah, our prisons are full. Yeah, everything sucks. It's disproportionate against people of color, and I don't have the answers. I just know that if you continue being a victim well into your 40s and 50s because your parents enabled you to do that, or your caregiver enabled you to do that, you've stunted their growth. You've stunted their ability for personal growth. I'd like to shave some of the years of that off. I don't regret the things I did. Had I had the wisdom that I have now, I'd like to pretend I have wisdom. We can all look back and say, what would have worked better at this time? Well, Curt and I were talking earlier about if I had any regrets. I've done some things that I'm not horribly proud of, but having made those mistakes, having suffered the consequence, having hidden it away so my guilt ate at me, I wouldn't be where I am today if you put life on a continuum, good and bad, and you're really struggling to get toward that good side, you have to know what the bad side is. You have to make those mistakes. You just have to be accountable for them. I can't find the words. So
I think I get a good sense of what you're saying. I look at this and think we needing to hold ourselves accountable is important, but just kind of going back into other things we've talked about in this conversation, describing some of the things that were done to the Native people, Indian people decades ago, and certainly there's repercussions of just how difficult to come out of that is. I think no matter what's happened, it's important to reckon for anyone, say living on the reservation here or anywhere that's life isn't as good maybe as it could be, to recognize both for that person to recognize possibly things they could do differently or better, but also for someone like me or from the descendants of the European colonizers to recognize, okay, I have as an individual, I don't know that I've done anything to harm this group of people over here, but being aware that there was definitely harm done, and because of that harm that stunted the progress or however you want to describe it, I'm not at fault, but there was something that people did wrong, so I need to be an advocate. I need to look more positively. How can I help? What can I do? Instead of just leaving a different group of people aside to fend for themselves, other people need to recognize what, if they didn't do better, or even if I didn't have anything to do with it, if someone before me effed up your ancestors' way of being, that's partly my responsibility to do my part now to help make things better for other people. That's how I look at it.
Recognizing intergenerational trauma. That's key here. It's one thing to say, I love your choice of words there. It's one thing to say, I didn't cause it, so I'm going to ignore it. Get over it. Well, we can't get over it because it's still occurring. We still have disparity income disparity. We still have active incidences of racism. We still have parents that are learning how to parent because they weren't taught. We still have, it's intergenerational. And now I guess they're finding, and I don't know that I know this for a fact, and I don't know if I really hold it, but they've got that DNA specific intergenerational trauma that they've kind of identified. I can see it because just in the feeling, I've always dreamt about being living up here. I felt a longing to be up here, a longing. It drew me and it drew me and it drew me. And I feel a completeness and a welcome home now that I'm here. And I must have got that gene because my sister didn't. I don't know the difference, but recognizing intergenerational trauma, stopping it, being patient. I don't care if it's with Indians. I don't care. I don't care which people it is. We're all carrying something. I just stop the victimizing and start the understanding. And I know that's like my favorite color is rainbow. It's
pretty
too broad of a sweep, but once you recognize, like Curt is saying, and you quit adding to it, our helpline isn't going to be throwing money at the problem. I'll take it, but it's not going to help. Look into reservation life, study it. If you have a business, you get a tax-free place here that provides jobs, that gives you tax-free advantages. I mean, those are things that you could actually do to support a struggling reservation community. Work with the councils that we have set up. If you've got, if you're a psychologist and you want to donate some time to some of our, I don't know, there's so many things that you can do, but recognizing that the problem still exists instead of going, oh, poo, get over it. You can't get over it when it's intergenerational and it hasn't stopped. Disproportionate numbers of Indian women being murdered, disproportionate numbers of our jail population up here. I believe the latest statistic is 40% of female inmates are American Indian or Canadian Indian, however you do it, again, across the border now. 40% of our female inmates are Indian in a population of, and I believe it's between 3 and 6% of the whole Manitoba population. There's something wrong. There's something wrong. We've identified it. Now, help us fix it.
Now let's move on to the personal growth segment, Terry. And as I've spent some time here with you, I've observed that it seems like you're spending a lot of time pondering things that you could do differently to help people. I don't know if you want to take this in that direction or if there's something about yourself that as you live out your retirement here, things that you want to keep on improving about yourself. But when I bring up personal growth, what comes to mind for you, Terry Henry?
I'm not looking for riches or a big anything like that. I want to be able to contribute to my community. My plans, like right now, I've got 3 little chickens laying my eggs, so I don't, Eventually, as I develop my little property here a little more, I would like to have meat rabbits, because I do like meat rabbits. And I would like to grow them for my community. Grow them, slaughter them, provide for other people. I would like to raise meat birds. Up here, Canada's prices are astronomical. A little bit, quite a bit, third to half higher than they are in the big cities in Minneapolis. But I'd like to help with that. And then I'd like to lead by example. If I can do it, living on the same kind of income that you're living on, and I'm a scavenger, so I cut corners wherever I can.
I've seen it.
Yeah, Curt will attest. If I can do it, I hope that somebody else can do it. There's a girl who was caught up in the 60s swoop. Teresa, I just love her. She's around the corner from me, about a mile. And she's doing the same thing. She's doing it with goats and sheep, and I'm just proud of people when they put that effort out. We want to fit in and we want to help our community. So I guess that's what I think about. And recently I've realized that the older I get, the more spiritual I get. And I think I see that amongst all these older Indian women. Curt and I'll argue religion. He's an atheist, and I just can't believe that this miracle of today can't be recognized by everybody. I don't have to go to church. I don't have to celebrate within a community. I have a communion with the Creator, with the cycle of life, and and I see this all the time. It becomes more and more important to us as we near the end of our lives. I'm only 60, so, I'm a little bit over the middle of my life, but it becomes more important to us. And I get a fulfillment from that. And it becomes, I don't know, I struggle again because it's such a personal thing. And I can't believe Curt is not smart enough to realize that.
Well, maybe. I'm happy to hear the difference, but you can attest to this too. You were forced into a religious environment that wasn't right for you. So although, yeah, what we believe or what I don't believe isn't the same, but at some point coming to the understanding of where we're at right now, we recognize that someone else is trying to tell me to believe this, and I don't believe this. And you've have different parts of your culture that probably lend you to believe what you believe more easily than it would get me to get there.
Right.
But just recognizing that you believe that. A recent guest who's from Somalia on my podcast, Hodan, is a Muslim. There's people in my life that are from other parts of the world that believe other things. I've stepped back, and I believe I don't have enough evidence to prove that any of these things are true. It doesn't mean that something isn't true.
Oh, yeah.
So I use the word atheist because it means I don't believe. But in my knowledge, I'm agnostic, as are you, and as is everybody, whether or not someone's willing to admit it, that we really don't know. We sense what we think is right. But we don't, as humans, I don't think there's a way of actually knowing. So I don't believe any of it. But when I come here and see your appreciation for being here and what you said, the trees were talking to each other and just observing that, like I can see that there's something to that is to be observed and try to be understood. It doesn't mean I believe it the same way you believe it, but I certainly appreciate it.
No, and I was just giving you a hard time. I love that anybody gets to believe the way they want to believe. And I wish we would extend that to let us Indian people raise our children the way we want to raise our own children, not to some colonizer's belief of how we should do it. And we have too many kids taken from us. It's our new 60s scoop. We're losing our kids. We can do better, you guys, and we will do better.
Now let's go to the being wrong segment. And you and I were talking about this, Terry, where I think perhaps the way that I look at being wrong and the way that you look at that also very different in our thinking. And you can take this however you want to take it, but after you maybe have gotten an understand of why I think recognizing what I was wrong about was important to me, how can you look back on your life and think about some way that you've changed your thinking or changed your actions that you think is worth sharing with my audience?
That one I struggle with. I am human. I've made lots of mistakes. I've made wrong decisions. Marriage. Some of the choices I made raising my children, I'm not real overly proud of. But had I not done those, I wouldn't have the ability to offset from that. And like I said earlier, I kind of view life as on a continuum. I kind of have, pity is not the right word, but I'm going to use it for lack of a better. I kind of have a pity for people that see things only in black and white. They believe in wrong and right. They believe, and I don't believe that way. I believe that, there's a negative aspect and a positive aspect, and I'm always struggling or striving or something to get to the positive. But how would I even recognize positive if I hadn't endured negative? So I believe in balance. I believe in, and I really wouldn't change anything I've done. Maybe I would have grown wiser quicker, but I don't have any regrets. There's some things I look back and I'm not real happy I did, but they wouldn't bring me, without having done them, I wouldn't be at the point I am now. Put life on a continuum. It's not black and white. It's along that range. I'm probably halfway toward positive. I've got the rest of my life to get toward positive, but I need those negative experiences to propel me farther toward the positive end. So I struggled with that one, Curt.
Yeah.
I really did.
But I can appreciate that you've really embraced anything that someone else might use the word wrong at, and maybe you don't use that word, but anything that you've learned from that you recognize after that you could have, not that you could have done it better in that moment, but you recognize as a learning point, an opportunity to do something better in the future. It seems like you take that very seriously. And that's a part of the continuum of recognizing, okay, I don't regret this. That's the way that it happened, but there's improvement to be found.
I think that's self-forgiveness. Man, I'm human. Shouldn't have done that. Let's do better. And I'm not glossing it over. Maybe you're saying, yeah, I shouldn't have peed on an electric fence. That was wrong. I certainly won't do that again. My dad did that. My mom said it stunted his growth. I don't know what she meant by that. Again, self-accountability and self-forgiveness. Okay, I did wrong. I'm doing better. I mean, I'm still a judgmental old woman. I'm still a judgmental old woman. Slowly, I'm shaving that off. I have a hard time with people. Say somebody gets out of prison. They did wrong. They paid their consequence and they're really trying to straighten their life out. And there's people out here that judge them. Like, I can't trust them. Give them a chance. They did wrong. They're trying to go toward the positive end. And it's like being punished over and over and over for the same thing. That bothers me. And we have, one of my very dearest friends does this. A person that practices medicine made a horrible mistake. I can't even say mistake. They cost somebody their life. They've atoned. It happened so long ago. They've turned their life around. They went trying to do positive things. And yet years and years and years and years later, they're still being judged and negatively impacted by something they've already atoned for, and especially when they came out and they changed their life around. So again, give people a chance, You can keep your guard up. I'm not saying be stupid and have a welcome mat on your back, You can have your guard up, but watch them grow. Help them grow. Don't keep kicking a dog when they're down. Self-accountability, is that how you would want your child who made a dreadful error? Is that how you would want your child treated? I try to do that quite a bit. When I find myself losing patience with a person, I go, oh, what if that was my kid? How would I want them treated? What if that was somebody I really loved? How would I want them treated? And I don't always hang on to that in the heat of the moment or something, but I try for that. If we start treating each other like true brothers and sisters, regardless, I got this white guy sitting in my kitchen, regardless of the color of your skin, if we start truly treating each other like brothers and sisters, we're going to stop this. Again, my favorite color is rainbow and crystals.
So this approach that you're taking now, is that something you took 20 years ago, 40 years ago?
No.
So I guess that we can phrase it how we want, but that gets to the point of this segment of you've recognized at some point in your life that the person walking out of prison or this person that did whatever they did, that we can't hold on to what they did a long time ago. We need to take that person as they are right now and do whatever we can to embrace them as a human and help to lift them up to a better point in their life, as opposed to holding on to our past knowledge or belief of who they once were and judging that person on that today. That's
excellent. You got it. Thanks for taking the words that were in my brain and putting them out there.
Good. So the segment did its purpose of recognizing something that you learn around through the years that you now see different, clearly, and better to pass on to other people that might not have considered it yet.
And I'm wondering if that doesn't come with age anyway.
I think it does.
Okay.
And
I'm an old bat, so I'm getting there.
But I don't think it doesn't come at the same age for everybody.
True.
And for my audience, it could be a wide ranging, and at any point in time, there's someone at some age that maybe had never considered that idea, or the idea I had last week, or the idea I'll have next week, or not maybe not my idea, but the idea that the person I have on with me. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is just share ideas that could improve an individual, or in some ways improve all of us.
Well, you're an excellent listener, and I kind of feel like you're an interpreter now, because that helped. When you said it out loud, that was exactly what I keep meaning to say, but struggled with it. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Terry. And I should offer you an opportunity to ask me any questions if you have them or want them, as I've spent about a month to about a day and a half with you here, and just reconnecting with you. And
you have been a wonderful house guest. You're welcome here anytime. If I'm not here, I hope that you can fit through the dog door.
I'll try.
But I will be here soon. So if you just show up in the neighborhood, 400 miles north of Minneapolis, you're always welcome. You're very easy to please, very easy to have around. And you eat my swill. So.
I'm not picky. I'll eat pretty much anything, and I should put that on the billboard for myself in case anyone else is willing to welcome me in at some point. I'm really easy to have around. I think.
He is. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot, because I swear to God, I live here alone, so I do a lot of talking when there's a human person here. And if Curt isn't here, I'm talking to my dog, my 14-year-old deaf dog. So now you know how he went deaf. I talk too much.
The dog has gotten a bit of a break while I've been here, so that's good. Terry, thank you for inviting me to your home and to capture some. This is only like probably 5% of our conversation since I've been here, but to capture some of it and allow me to share that with a larger audience and hopefully have a positive impact on somebody or some people out there.
Well, I appreciate that you're patient with me as I'm rambling, because my brain is so full of these ideas that I just want to sploosh them out, and you did a good job.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to People I Know Show. Links are in the show notes for the People I Know Show Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube accounts. When you go over to the Facebook and Instagram pages, you'll see a photo of Terry and I. Terry, relaxed at home, was in her pajamas when we recorded this conversation. And you'll get to see a photo of me and her chickens. And remember, when you go to those social media pages, please subscribe. so you can stay in contact with future People I Know Show content. And if you haven't already subscribed on the app that you're listening on, hit that subscribe button so each episode will automatically download to your phone or mobile device. Use any of the People I Know Show social media accounts to get in contact with me directly, or you can always send an email to me, Curt Carstensen, by using the email address peopleiknowshow@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.